There's nothing quite as terrifying as a seemingly unwitting totem that flips your entire life upside down. W. Jacobs' The Monkey's Paw sets the blueprint for this trope. A mysterious enchanted monkey's paw said to grant any 3 wishes its owner would ask of it, but only at a terrible price. You don't want to know how Mr. White got the final down payment for his mortgage and what it was ultimately worth to him in the grand scheme of things, trust us, but this idea of a totem with powers both awesome and terrifying is appealing to storytellers for good reason. The possibilities are endless. In Jujutsu Kaisen, Sukuna's finger is a cursed object, another term for a totem really, which grants the person who ingests it the great powers of Ryomen Sukuna, at the terrifying cost of binding their souls to his. We've all seen how helpful that has been to Yuji Itadori in the anime series, and for those of you who have read the manga, well, you know a bit more about that, don't you? But the one thing that is perhaps even scarier than swallowing the appendage of the King of Curses is to one day find yourself in possession of an egg-shaped object that, for some reason, has a misshapen face etched into it. Or at least that's what it looks like in the beginning. The Behelit shows up in the 4th chapter of the Black Swordsman arc for the first time and has left an indelible mark on the series. This creepy yet seemingly innocuous object can be seen as the sole reason for the sheer misery that plagues the world of Berserk. And here's the real kicker. It is actually alive. And the reason why it is so dangerous lies in its anatomy. In this video, we're going to break down everything about a Behelit, from who created it to why it looks like a grossed out ogre face. This is the Behelit's Anatomy Explored. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means an awful lot. Thank you. Let's begin. But first, how do we know that it's a lie? Well, to be perfectly honest with you, we're really going according to dialogue when it comes to this one. Well, that in the instances where Behelits actually exhibit lifelike qualities, and trust us, we'll get into those. But here's the thing, you wouldn't be able to tell whether it was alive or just a piece of artwork if your life depended on it because, number 1, Behelits are usually inactive, and number 2, they were introduced as keys, technically speaking. At the end of Guardian Angels of Desire Part 1, which is the 3rd overall chapter of the Black Swordsman arc, Guts and a still reluctant traveling companion slash full-time healer Puck arrive in the dingy little workshop of a man called Vargas. Now, we knew Vargas was going to be about that life when we first saw him. He's got most of his face bandaged, come on you guys. But what makes us feel for him is not even the fact that he was mutilated to a point where he has to use crutches to even walk, which we do feel for, mind you, but the fact that he was clueless about the nature of the thing that he believed had caused all of his misery and that of the people who resided within the Slug Count's town demonstrates how helpless a regular person was in the face of the unknown in Berserk's world. All Vargas knew about the Behelit was that it was something that his former master came across by chance. One day, a few traveling merchants showed up at the castle and sold it to the Count back in his human days. When they were asked where they had gotten the peculiar item from, their only reply was that they found it in a town bazaar in the Far East. At the time, no one in the Slug Count or Vargas's company knew just what this egg-like stone was capable of, but the physician himself soon realized that whatever it was, it had to be evil. Vargas noticed that ever since receiving the Behelit, his master's usually cruel demeanor had taken on an otherworldly degree of brutality. It happened after the mysterious death of the Count's wife, and Vargas realized that the man he used to serve under, whether out of fear or loyalty, we don't know, was no longer a man at all. We see snippets of the demonic appearance of the Slug Count and his gluttonous appetite as Vargas recalls the tragic tale of how he had to watch his wife and sons be killed, violated, and devoured, and how all he himself could do throughout the duration of his own torture was stay paralyzed in fear. And in his mind, the root cause of all these misfortunes that had befallen his city was the Behelit. So after he was done recounting his tale to Guts, he asks the swordsman about the Behelit's nature, to which Guts replies that it's a key. The Behelit, when used, opens a portal to another world that overlaps our own. It is a key that summons demons who have manipulated the dark side of human history since ancient times, aka the God Hand. Vargas and Puck are both impressed and a little disturbed by his explanation, but Puck skews more towards the former category. After we come back from a little break for a pseudo-apostle creation lesson, which you can find out more about from the video on their creation on our channel, Puck begins to play with the Behelit. He first tries to rearrange his own face to match its misshapen mug to no avail. He then pokes it in one of its closed eyelids and recoils his hand just as quick, once again, to no reaction. He gathers some courage and smacks it on the top of its head, and when the Behelit once again doesn't react, Puck becomes convinced that it's safe. He starts calling the object well-made and a piece of art instead of the terrifying totem Guts described it as. But when he makes eye contact with one of the Behelit's misplaced eyes, it opens up and stares back at him for just a brief moment. Yet that moment was long enough to terrify Puck and prompt Guts to claim that the thing was alive. Puck reprimands him for not telling him earlier, and when he looks back at the Behelit's eye again, sure enough, it stares right back at him. Remember this, because this will be important later on in the video. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's just an isolated incident. Maybe all Behelits don't act like this rogue voyeur, but the thing is, every Behelit in the series behaves the same way whenever it catches someone staring. In the last prelude chapter of Berserk, titled The Golden Age Part 8, a similar thing happens to Guts himself when he stares at Griffith's Crimson Behelit and it stares back at him. There are several other instances across the series that can be considered as signs of life, though the overall structure and demeanor of a Behelit does not transcend its form as an egg. As Guts points out, by itself, a Behelit is pretty harmless. It's like a monkey's paw without the wish-granting abilities. But when certain conditions are met and the Behelit is activated, its powers arguably rival that of any enchanted monkey's paw you're gonna find in India, and that's all down to its anatomy. So let's get into that now. It leaks tears of blood and lets out a dimension-splitting scream. What happens when you use a Behelit? If you guys think that the inert form of a Behelit is disconcerting, then you seriously don't want to know what it does and looks like when it's activated, because that is the main part of where the anatomy of a Behelit becomes relevant. So let's dive straight into it. Now, most of the time, a Behelit maintains its stoic, jumbled-up facial demeanor, unless of course you stare at it, in which case it stares back at you, and good on the Behelit for doing that. Staring at people is rude. But when certain conditions that have been both preordained by fate and engineered by man are fulfilled, the Behelit comes out of hibernation to perform the duty Guts claims it can perform, and does so in the most unnerving manner possible. We see this for the first time during the Black Swordsman arc itself, shortly after the Behelit's introduction in fact, when after a brutal drawn-out encounter with Guts, the Slug Count ends up activating his long-lost Behelit return. On the panel, we see his lifeblood flow towards and pool around the Behelit, as he himself cries desperately that he did not want to die. These two things occurred simultaneously, and Guts immediately realized that something major was about to go down because the brand on his neck started to hurt and bleed. The Black Swordsman and Puck both realized that the scenery around them had started to change, and they look at the Behelit with haste, which now looked completely unlike its regular form. Lying in the center of the Count's blood, the Behelit had rearranged its features to resemble the face of a person that was experiencing incredible pain. Its nose was wrinkled, its jaw laid bare in a scream-like position, its brow all scrunched up as if it were about to pass out from the pain. But the most noticeable difference was in the eyes. The formerly idiosyncratic placement of the eyes seems much less terrifying when you consider the fact that, when arranged properly, they leak tears of blood. And when the Behelit opens its eyes, that's when the magic happens. Once a Behelit has rearranged its own face and shed its tears of blood and let out a blood-curdling scream that is somehow as loud as a low whisper, it opens up a rift in space and time itself and brings everyone in its vicinity to a location known as the interstice. This place is like a halfway point between the physical world that we live in and the astral world where higher spiritual existences reside, like angels and yes, demons as well. From this point forward, the Behelit itself plays no role in what unfolds. Guts, Puck, Teresia, and the dying Slug Count are given an audience with the God Hand. The Count decides his daughter's life is more precious than his own, so he chooses to go to hell literally, and Guts tries to attack the God Hand Femto/Griffith twice and fails. Once the God Hand departs, the interstice dissolves, and curiously enough, the Behelit pops back into the castle as if someone had thrown it back in there. Guts picks it up, tells Teresia she is free to kill him whenever she wants to, shows remorse over his actions privately, and keeps struggling forward on his own 2 feet. But this tells you that a Behelit doesn't die after it's been used once. It continues to live, and maybe even be reactivated once it finds its rightful owner, because that is one of the most important things when it comes to using a Behelit. You gotta be the one destined to use it. This detail isn't revealed to us immediately, however. It is explained to us by Miura through subliminal messaging and some overt references to the fact scattered across the entire Golden Age arc. It is during the eclipse that we truly understand what the nature of a Behelit is, and our understanding of this egg keeps evolving as we meet more and more characters entrenched within the arcane in the world of Berserk. Even as late as chapter 345, we're still learning new details about the Behelit, but now that we know everything there is to know about it, for the most part, we can finally break down its anatomy and inner workings for you guys. An embodiment of evil that comes from the abyss, the anatomy of a Behelit, and how it works. To put it very simply, a Behelit is a sentient drop of abyssal power that has been sent forth into the physical world by the controller of fate and seemingly all lives in Berserk, the idea of evil. In chapter 82, after making up his mind to sacrifice all his friends in exchange for the power he needed to claim his own kingdom, Griffith's physical body is wrapped in a cocoon that lies within the close-fisted altar of the God Hand. But his astral body sinks deeper within the astral world. As he keeps drowning, he experiences his comrades' deaths pierce through him, but he remarks that he feels nothing. No guilt, no remorse, just an emptiness and the feeling of sinking. After doing so for what we're sure felt like an eternity to him, Griffith sees a shimmering pool in front of his eyes, right underneath him. Just as he notices this, the pool sends splashes across his face as if they were raindrops, and Griffith notices that each of these drops has a tortured-looking face on it. That's right, folks. Those raindrops were actually Behelits. And just as Griffith goes to ask the obvious question, why were Behelits here of all places, a voice from the pool answers it for him. The voice calls Behelits droplets of ideas that have spilled forth from this sea to eternity, and a summons to the other world. And the chapter ends with Griffith coming face to thing with a giant beating heart that, for some reason, had multiple eyes covering its massive body. Griffith questions whether this was God, and if you're a good little rule follower, that's where it all ends. We skip to chapter 84, Guts starts sliding down a face mountain with apostles chasing him, and all hell quite literally breaks loose. But we never get an explanation for that moment, unless we bend the rules just a little bit. The deleted chapter 83 of Berserk sees Griffith's conversation with God, aka the idea of evil, and we get a good idea of not only how causality works and how the God Hand is created, we also understand key things about the anatomy of a Behelit and the reason behind its existence. To put it simply, the idea of evil only came into existence because humanity willed it into existence through their collective subconscious. Because humans required reasons to justify their suffering, the idea now basically gives them that reason by controlling people's fates and also sending out a summons to a select few who represent what it thinks is the one ideal that humans live by, which is to do as thou wilt. This summons is where Behelits become relevant. The idea of evil's phrasing is rather cryptic, but what it means when it calls a Behelit a droplet of ideas spilled over from this sea to eternity is that it is a totem powered by the essence of evil that dwells within the abyss and has been sent into the physical world to corrupt the person it is meant to corrupt. We learn that last bit about the Behelit's anatomy when Guts meets Flora the Witch, who further explains to us the nature of a Behelit. See, back in chapter 40, Griffith lost his Crimson Behelit while he was being tortured by the King of Midland's torturer. But after his escape and subsequent tangle with the Black Dog Knights, a man who had previously tried to kill him gave him a strange ray of hope. In chapter 69, Nosferatu Zod shows up out of nowhere and kills the Apostle Wild, who had been sent after Griffith and his rescue party by the king himself. Wild had been decisively defeated by Guts and was on the verge of death, so he, knowing about Griffith's status as a chosen one, tries to leverage his Behelit instead. He wrangles the former White Falcon around looking for his Crimson Behelit, but when he doesn't find it, he decides to kill the guy. That's when Zod shows up, kills Wild, and without ever listening in on the exchange, flatly states to Griffith that it will return to your hand because that's how it is, before promptly flying his immortal butt right out of there. Griffith doesn't quite get why Zod says this to him, but then chapter 72 rolls around and Zod's prediction comes true. As Griffith kneels in a lake west of the Midland border, he sees his Crimson Behelit float to the surface of the lake as if it had been waiting for him within the depths ever since he lost it. Flora explains that this happens because a Behelit is intricately linked to the ultimate fate of its owner. By itself, the Behelit is nothing more than a stone, but this stone is linked to the fate of the person who is meant to own it, and it will always find its way back to its owner regardless of whether they've been separated or not, especially at the moment when they crave their power the most. See, the reason a Behelit is activated in the first place is out of the immense ego and desire of the person that owns it. Yes, things like the owner's blood making contact with the Behelit seem to be necessary activation conditions, but what it really boils down to is a person's deep attachment to the one desire that defines their existence, and their utter refusal to pass away without having obtained it. This is why most apostles seem so bestial in nature, because for most of them, their ultimate desire was to simply simply continue living. Apostles like Zod have a higher purpose guiding them, in that Zod himself seeks to fight the person that fits his definition of the strongest, and you can be sure that played a huge role in his turning into an apostle as well. But for the most part, apostles are simply bloodthirsty gluttons because their innate desire as humans was to live a full, unapologetic life. However, as Flora pointed out to Guts, only a person fated to become an apostle can activate the Behelit and summon the God Hand. And even then, it depends on the apostle's decision. After Guts and his party depart her mansion on a mission to hunt down trolls, Flora states in a discussion with Skull Knight that she believes causality might have already written down a person's fate, but it was on that person to follow their fated path, and if they really wanted to, they could ignore that fate entirely. We've seen this happen in the series already, because the Slug Count was able to deny fate and be reincarnated a second time, thanks to his willful decision of choosing his daughter's life over his own. People with exceptional resistance to divine offers of power can possibly bypass the after effects of using a Behelit, but so far, we've seen no such person emerge. And what makes the Behelit such a dangerous thing, even after being used once, is, as we've already mentioned, it can seemingly be used again and again. The Slug Count's Behelit had already been used by him once before he faced off with the Black Swordsman, and it just might be used again. Currently, it resides in Guts' satchel, where it has earned the nickname Becky and been force-fed more cheese than we care to talk about thanks to Puck, but we don't know if Guts is simply holding on to it or whether he's its owner. None of the magical powerhouses of the series can determine that either, as neither Flora nor Guru Gedfring from Elfhelm had anything helpful to say about Becky's true ownership, just practical warnings for Guts instead. But Becky Boy has been useful to Guts regardless, because as a living being, whenever it gets close to something that reminds it of home, it starts to resonate with it, in turn making it an excellent radar for messed up astral activity in the immediate vicinity. Because a Behelit is essentially an embodiment of the evil fate of humans sent to the physical world to reinforce said evil fate, whenever it comes into contact with an aura that reminds it of the abyss, it starts shaking and rearranging its facial features to a near-activated state. It happened when Guts was in Kliphoff and Slan manifested, and then again when Femto triggered the great roar of the astral world and the entire globe entered an interstice. In both cases, what we believe happened was that the evil essence of the abyss, which could be felt at both places, resonated with the evil essence within the Behelit itself, causing it to forcefully reach a state of near activation. The only thing that we've seen which can effectively deal with its terrifying power is Skull Knight ingesting them to turn them into his sword of actuation, and even that is a half measure at best because he's simply repurposing the Behelits instead of actually destroying them. In that regard, a Behelit is the most powerful living totem in all of fiction, because not only can you not kill it, it can predict when something can kill you, and you won't even realize it if you haven't been struggling your whole life like Guts has. It's the single most dangerous artifact in Berserk, and people end up treating it like a neat trinket, which is exactly what Griffith did before his ascension. A Behelit is something that you terribly want to own, but trust us when we say, what comes after is something that none of us need. Marvelous verdict! When Shirke was taming the rotting Root Lord in Kliphoff, she recalled a lesson from her mistress, Flora. As she was learning about how to commune and cooperate with nature spirits, Flora told her favorite disciple that when she tried to commune with beings of darkness, she should be extra careful because, more often than not, the darkness tends to stare back. Well, if we knew that at the start of this series, we'd have encouraged Guts to chuck the one he carries around into the same canal that he used to escape Vargas's lab and never look back. Behelits are the very reason that most of the bad guys in Berserk became the way they are, and the fact that they just find you when you're at your lowest and give you power makes them sound like your best friends, but once again, you're gonna have to trust us when we say, don't give in to those tears of blood. Your soul will end up regretting it. But that's enough out of us. What did you guys think of the video? What are your opinions on the Behelit? Is it alive, or is that just another cruel trick? Let us know what you think in the comments down below, and we'll see you guys in the next one. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, be safe out there, and thanks for watching.